I've flown around the world in a plane. I've settled revolutions in Spain. And the North Pole I have charted.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark DiCarlo. Today my guest is Mr. Pretzer, who oftentimes fills in for us. I thank you very much for coming on. Randall.
I enjoyed coming on. Thank you for inviting me.
And Mr. Pretzer is a little bit of a historical, what would you say, you're a buff about World War II, primarily historical?
Yes, World War II, somewhat about Vietnam, and then I have read some interesting reading about the Iraq wars too.
Oh, okay. And you brought over these books, and I said, I stole them from them.
Oh, yeah.
You brought them over. T.S. Eliot, Anti-Semitism, The Literary Form. Ben McIntyre, Rogue Heroes, A History of the SAS, British Secret Special Forces Unit that sabotaged the Nazis and changed the nature of war. And Churchill's History of Ungentlemanly Warfare, the Mavericks who plotted Hitler's defeat. And we can't show the books too long because I'll come pick up a complaint from
Copyright. We don't want to get
no from the local, somebody local here.
Oh,
Everybody's got an issue. But you know, when we were talking right before the show, you said small arms. And it reminded me of a discussion I had with my father, God rest his soul. I said, you know, all these gun advocates say that, oh, we're going to protect America from takeover with small arms. No, not they don't refer small arms. My gun, and we need to defend ourselves, and we could protect ourselves from the government, we could protect ourselves from the foreign invaders. And I said, well, what do you think about that, Pop? Because he was in World War II. And he says, small arms, nah. So what do you think?
Guns? I agree. Well, I would.
Are these military assault rifles that are being used in these schools? What do they call it? The AR?
They call them AR-15s.
Are those considered small arms?
Yeah, I would consider them smaller. Then when you start getting into quote big arms, you're getting into things that very large caliber. They border on cannon.
Okay.
You get into 20. You get into 20 millimeter.
Are the small arms going to protect us from the United States government? Are they going to protect us from foreign invaders? Are they going to protect us?
No, because one thing, if you're going to confront a foreign invader, first of all, you should hope that because of our satellites and our intelligence units, we would know that it or they or whoever they are coming first. And remember, as Rommel said about the invasion by the U.S., the Allies, France, if we do not stop them on the beach, it's all over. They understood that. So yeah, well, so small.
I never understood the argument either. I always said, well, you control the water supply, you control the electricity, you control the major roads. What are you talking?
Yeah, well, they're going back to this somehow interpretation of the Second Amendment, and I keep trying to tell my friends, some friends who have several weapons, and I'm saying, especially I remember during Obama's administration, I said, who are you afraid of? And I said, has anyone come and knocked on your door? Maybe the IRS has, but I said, has anyone come and knocked on your door? No, not yet. This is always not yet. And I said, look, what kind of weapons do you have? What do you have? A Glock? Maybe you have a AR-15 knock-up. And I said, do you know which end the bullet comes out of? And they don't like that when I say that to them. And I said, look, all they're going to do, if you want to really get smart with these guys, they could bring an Abrams tanks up to your house and in 1 or 2 rounds flatten it. And you're not going to be able to push them away with your little AR-15.
Well, I've said that too.
There's no way. And I said, I don't expect the government to like. The only time I was really upset was, remember that thing in Waco, with the religious guy?
It happened time and time again. Waco, there was bombings in Philadelphia. People small. I mean,
Yeah, and I just tell them you're not good. If you think the government's going to come after you, you need to call your congressman.
I did change my opinion on it a little bit because at the Iraq War, guerrilla warfare. They're not bad, right?
Well,
not bad.
Guerrilla warfare is fine, but I'm trying to think of where it was ever really terribly successful. Maybe in Cuba.
Afghanistan seems like it's always successful.
Well,
right?
Afghanistan is so complex because, see, they've managed to run the British out, they've managed to run the Soviets out after 10 years. They just said, the heck with it, we're not going to fool with you anymore. And of course, we're still there knocking around. But the problem is, we had come to some sort of accord with that large group in Afghanistan that they were going to lay off. But then somebody in some administration, president one I guess, said something stupid, and so now they're active again. And furthermore, again, always the problem with those countries where supposedly the guerrillas are successful is a guerrilla organization becomes, after a while, as bureaucratic as any army.
Was it?
Well, let me just real quick here. And the problem is, it's your central government is so corrupt. So
Right,
the
it's
guerrilla
like France.
organization goes out in the field. Yeah, guerrilla. Well, let's define that. But they become bureaucratic as anything else, and they're going to have the sympathy of the people in the field because the government does nothing but steal from that particular government. So that's always been the problem. Malaysia, when the British went in there after World War II, they said, we're not coming in here to help you out with your insurgents if you do not reform. And that was the same with Vietnam, remember? Kennedy was emphatic. If you're not going to reform your government, these so-called guerrilla forces will overwhelm you, which they did, of course.
What about the French resistance movement that we always heard so much about in World War II? Were they effective? My father always kind of ridiculed them.
Oh, I thought they were effective.
I think they were.
And that was resistance.
think
Now,
they
I don't
were.
call it, partisans are not necessarily, partisans that's where they moved from being a guerrilla, a bunch of guys going out in the woods and eating snails and taking shots at somebody once in a while, to an organization that becomes supplied. The problem with a partisan movement, moving from guerrilla to partisan, that you've got to have a supply source, which the British became and we became, dropping supplies into the partisans, explosives, grenades, weapons.
Didn't we supply the Afghanistanians against the Russians to a certain extent?
Yeah, to a certain extent, and of course that didn't. In fact, we actually supported the one who was in Afghanistan, who ultimately was supposedly responsible for 9/11, which I still think.
Bin Laden.
Yeah, and I don't think he was.
Well, there were these tapes that said that there were these tapes that originally came out that basically he admitted it, and then I guess they say that's not true. He didn't.
Yeah. Well, you can do anything with the cameras and slicing and chopping and make everybody look good. But no, I think it was much more sinister than that. But if I say too much, people will call me not a patriot or
that's
anything.
interesting.
Yeah, they'll call me
Actually-
names.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
You want me to say what you're thinking?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say
You're
it.
thinking the American government is somehow involved in 9/11?
Here's my reasoning. Okay, number one.
That's not. Wait a minute. Let me say this.
Can I get my?
to the viewers.
No,
Yeah,
go
wait a
ahead.
minute. That's a respective view. A lot of people think that. So you're not off the wall. I don't know that I agree, but go ahead.
I don't know whether I agree. I have trouble with it too. The problem is the reading and thinking. Maybe we should abolish thinking. Who was it? Oppenheimer said we should abolish thinking. But anyway, my problem is you've got 4 planes, large airliners taking off, and then their machines are shut down, so apparently you can't track them. But yes, you can still track them. And then you have one flying to New York City, which is a no-fly zone. And why weren't these jets that we pay billions of dollars a year to maintain, train, and fly, we're not going towards New York City? And I wonder, what is going on? And you read hear the transcripts of the air traffic controller saying this is not a drill, this is a real mess. And I want to say, then the argument was, Mark, oh, well, you can't shoot these down without presidential approval. No, that's not the case. There's a protocol for shooting down a rogue plane, which is first, there's a frequency to hail the pilot. Somebody's sick or somebody may have had a heart attack in the cabin. I don't know. Number 2, you wag your wings in front of them. That means you follow me. Number 3, they won't respond until you fire across their bow. And number 4, down they go. It's terrible, I know. Terrible responsibility. Well, given
Excuse me for 1 second.
Oh.
Everything that you're saying, though, none of that has been published to the masses. I guess you were reading in depth, or you knew this in probably your military
There's a
experience.
number of
that
books.
hasn't been published.
Oh, there's a number of books that talk
Okay.
about that. And the problem is that, and then the Pentagon area is a no-fly zone. and you've got supposedly an airliner which needs a certain height off the ground to fly because it's the physics of the wing and the weight that's flying along the high as the ceiling maybe, and goes into the Pentagon, and you're looking there, well, where are the parts? And where's this big hole? And now the theory is that it was actually a cruise missile. And where are the tapes? Well, they were confiscated immediately by the authorities. And I want to say that plane couldn't have come that low across the ground and hit the Pentagon. It wouldn't have been able to, it would have crashed along much earlier because there wasn't enough there to provide the lift for its weight. So there's a number of things that bother me now. Am I convinced that there's a conspiracy? One of several things happened. Yes, there was a conspiracy. For whatever reason, everybody wanted a war with Iraq for some reason. This is the way to do it. And of course, years later, we find that there were no weapons of mass destruction and all this other stuff. Or in fact, there was a rogue element in the government. This was a false flag, and that this was precipitated for some other reason I can't think of. Or there were some people in possibly Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East. Remember, they were sued recently in court, and apparently in a large judgment, who wanted this to happen for whatever reason. Why so? Because after 9/11, about 26 or 27 people were put on a plane and sent home. I want to say they shouldn't have left the country. These people were suspects. They should have been arrested. So there's a lot of stuff floating around, and it's hard to piece it all together. It's like that flight 800. Remember the? Mm-hmm. And there was a theory that number one, that it was shot down by terrorists. Number two, that the Navy was having maneuvers out there, which it was, and they were having trouble with their software distinguishing between fair and foul. In other words, it was screwing up. Of course, then they say, well, it was a tank that blew up. That I don't believe.
That flight was going to Malaysia or something?
It was going to Paris. And
where was it downed?
No, it was downed right outside New York City. It was taking off.
I'm sorry.
Flight 800.
Okay, so you're talking
I'm not talking about the Malaysia flight.
Okay,
I'm talking about,
okay.
This is 800, and they're still disputing that. And they brought the FBI in, and the FBI ultimately said, well, we can't do this. And of course, Clinton was in office. And I thought maybe there was pressure by the administration saying, well, we're going to have to blame, we can't, if it's terrorists, it shows like we weren't doing our job. If it's the Navy screwed up, because apparently all that personnel were dispersed afterwards to other duty stations. If it's because the Navy screwed up, because they were having trouble with their software, well, that's embarrassing to us, so let's find something. So they had this theory about the center fuel tank. Don't buy that. A lot of people do not buy that. And there were people on the ground.
You saw the missile.
Some of these were.
And it looks like a missile.
Yeah, and they said, look, it's going.
Looks like a missile. They said they saw a missile.
They saw several of them going up.
Right.
Now, and all of a sudden they want to talk to everybody like they were going down. These were pieces going down. I said, oh, God, give me a break.
And and just as an aside, they wonder why everybody's paranoid. They wonder why, and there have been a number of conspiracy theories, of course, through the years that have proven to be true, whether it's that Gulf and Tonkin incident, or et cetera. There were no weapons of mass destruction, or Bin Laden wasn't actually in Afghanistan, so there's been a number of things that have proven to be true. So it kind of makes you disbelieve the media and your own sanity.
Well,
in a way.
The problem is I don't have any trouble with the media as long as they don't become purveyors of propaganda. The British were good at propaganda during World War II, so very good at it. But then again, the people weren't that stupid because they were starving and didn't have any
What
food.
What choice did the British have except to?
I think they still could have kept it open, and the people would have still fought. Okay, the British, remember, they're related to Vikings too. The Germans forgot that. I also forgot that the Russians were related to Vikings.
So this book, the history of Churchill's history of ungentlemanly warfare, I guess would change subjects from the conspiracy.
Oh, that's
theories.
fine. To no nonsense approach to defending yourself. Yeah, they say, oh, how.
So how many atrocities were the British involved in against the Germans in World War II? Would you say?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Bombing of Dresden. How's that? Firebombing.
Dresden, Germany,
Firebomb.
made famous in the Kurt Vonnegut book,
Oh,
Slaughterhouse
yeah.
Five.
Oh yeah, there was no
And
need.
Vonnegut was over there.
Yeah, he was down there in the Schlachthaus in Thunt, Slaughterhouse Five, which is he was there working there, and somebody got up. It looked like the surface of the moon. Remember the novel? Yeah, the British did that. I think we also participated in that bombing.
We did.
Oh yeah. And
I thought under the Vonnegut book, by the way, that we were it was primarily our action, but it wasn't. It was
Bomber Harris was. Bomber Harris was. What was it? He was driving a very fancy, speedy car, and the police stopped him and said, "Don't you know you could have killed someone?" And he says, "I kill thousands of people every day." That was his response. God,
Well,
Jesus.
at least he's honest.
Hey, let me. Hey, if
There's
our,
something to be said about honesty.
I thought we were just as. Look how ruthless we were.
Look, God forbid I say this. I'm going to bring
No,
this
go
up and
ahead.
interrupt you.
I'm sorry.
President Barack Obama, our big peace president, I don't know how many people he killed with drones.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Would he say it? He wouldn't say it, you know.
But at least they had a policy to use them. And am I?
They say it was his. They said that he had meetings. He made the prime. A lot of times
Right.
he made the decisions
He made
in the White House.
At least he was willing to make the decision, as opposed to someone we have now who doesn't know day from night. But you know, people say, and I was reading this, and I said, "Hey, you got to read the history of Churchill. He was in the trenches in World War I after Gallipoli. He basically got fired, okay, because he screwed that up. And so he went to the trenches, and he went in there as a captain. I think came out a colonel, and he knew how terrible war was. And I want to say, this guy, he's not afraid of anybody. Never was. Look what he did in South Africa. So,
What did he do in South Africa?
oh, he was with the forces that were fighting the Boer War. He was part of that, and he was captured, and he managed to escape. And he was a tough guy. I don't care what anybody says. Remember, he was half American. His mother was American. His father was British. But people complain how ruthless Churchill was. I said, wait a minute now. Roosevelt and his friends, when Pearl Harbor came and was bombed, they decided, the governor of California was what was his name? Earl Warren. And they decided they were going to move to facilities, encampments, about 130,000 people, most of whom were citizens, if I'm not mistaken, without even any kind of tribunal. At least the British would have tribunals, and they'd have certain ratings. If you were a refugee, okay, fine, but you had to be a certain distance from the shoreline. And if there was any suspicion, they just put you in an internment camp. But they at least had a tribunal to determine that. We had nothing. We just said, okay, fine, pack up, go. Talk about ruthless. People get ruthless, and I said, no, I could understand. I could understand.
Britain was ruthless.
Oh yeah.
United States was ruthless because they bombed.
Yeah, not going to back off.
Yeah.
Then here.
And Germany wasn't ruthless.
Oh, Germany was terrible. Well, remember now, in World War I, the Germans were responsible when they were moving through, what was it, Belgium and Holland and Belgium and down to northern France. They were going to play their Schlieffen plan. And they were in Liège, the Belgian town, which had a beautiful medieval library of hundreds of thousands of volumes, and they just burned it to the ground as some sort of retaliation because a couple of people shot at them when they drove in. And I thought, you know, as Churchill said about the British, about the Germans, either they're at your throat or at your feet. And the Germans were terrible. And well, look what they did when they moved into the Soviet Union. Instead of, they had some people welcome them, especially in Ukraine, with open arms, and then all they had the Einsatz group following in, just killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people, murdering them. You know, no due process whatsoever. And then they wonder why they lost. And I warned people about Russia. I know we have Putin to deal with today, these days. But I said, you know, you need to understand that a country that's been invaded, and I'm talking about invaded, 4 times. Have we ever been really invaded except by the British? That was 1812. And we haven't gotten over that yet.
Isn't this their country?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They think it's their country. Yeah. And here's and I'm telling that people, I said, don't underestimate the Russians. Every person who's ultimately invaded their country, I mean every group, they've the Russians that ran over the top of them after a while and followed them back to their capital. 1812 or 1812, the Cossacks marched through Paris, and they had the Allies, the Prussians, and a few other people go with them. But I'm saying, Kutuzov, the Russian general, who said to the Alexander I, their Tsar, we pushed them past the border that they came across. That's enough. And he says, no, that's not enough. And they went on to Paris.
How were the Russian atrocities then?
Oh.
They're not as bad as the German.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask
America
you.
and
now
Britain,
we've been
they're
through
better?
this. We've been through this. Well, remember, like, my question is, if the Japanese and the Germans, let's say the Germans came in the East Coast and the Japanese came in the West Coast, and got maybe 300 or 400 miles in, and did all the things that they did to the people in China, the Japanese, what they did in, especially Nanking, the atrocities the Japanese army committed, and what the Germans did in their ruthlessness, and well, a very ruthless bunch. And let's say we would ultimately prevailed, because the real, excuse my lesson, SOBs who you get to fight the wars would have come forward, like Patton and the rest of them, and we'd have pushed them out. But I don't think any of them would have left the country alive. When I talk to people, my friends and everything, and I think that we would have been really.
So you're
we would have been.
So what
we've
you're
been worse
implying?
than the Russians. We wouldn't have even had any trials. It would have been like, if you see the no prisoners of war, just kill them. Look what they've done to our families. I thought the Russians were restrained, really, reasonably restrained. People argue with me, and I said, well, why don't you do some reading before you talk to me any further? But that's a good question.
Well, you mentioned something about Putin, and in the last show that I filmed with John Kelly, his name came up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much of what they say about him is true or not true. I had told John my unusual opinion. I said, I think because he basically converted Russia back to Christianity through the Orthodox religion, a lot of liberals hate him for that. Any truth in that?
Gee, I never thought of it that way.
I think so. Because they always loved, the liberals always loved Russia. Oh, Russia. Okay, now they hate him in the United States.
I have a different opinion. My opinion is...
I don't know what I'm saying.
No, I didn't.
It's just an opinion. Yes.
I said Putin, number one, they said, well, he was a colonel in the KGB. I said, no, he wasn't. He was a general in the KGB. Don't give me that crap. And I said he was very well trained. He's a smart person. And who else could accumulate these huge assets? But he deals, I've listened to him give his speeches. Every May the 6th, the Russians have their Victory Day parade. And one day, about 3 years ago, they had a parade. And
Victory Day parade over who?
The Russians, World War II.
Okay.
Over the Germans.
Right.
And so they celebrate that. They've done that ever since 1945, May the 6th.
When I was watching RTV, I would see that, and I was kind of surprised that they would keep beating the same dead horse. But they do.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's magnificent, because they start out with these six young men who are honor graduates of their military schools, leading with the Russian flag and the old Soviet flag, and they're goose stepping, but not like.
Trump's going to bring that to the United States. A magnificent parade like that for us Americans.
Yeah, right, so we get to pay for it. And they go across, and these guys have to really train for this, because they swing their legs perpendicular to the and it's beautiful. And the music, and then but you notice the Russian military has historically always been subservient to the civilian authority. So when the Minister of Defense comes out and makes his, stops at certain units and says, "How are you today?" and they go, "I'm just fine, so and so." And then he goes up to Putin and he salutes. Putin's in a civilian uniform, civilian clothes, and it's like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm still in charge. And I listen to Putin's speeches, the translation that I get now. I'm not a Russian linguist, but the translation, and it's a very moderate speech. That we're here to remember the terrible times that we went through, so forth and so on. We're never going to let this happen again, so forth and so on, and it makes a lot of sense. So he's coming. My opinion, maybe it's because of my historical bigotry. He's coming saying, "Hey, look how many times we've been invaded. The West you can't trust. Look what the Germans did. They invaded us twice. Well, actually 3 times." World War II, World War I, and then there was the Knights of, gosh, what is it called? There was, I can't remember, the Teutonic Knights. All were defeated. The Swedes, and then Napoleon, they were all defeated. And we have not necessarily gone through that except maybe with 1812, okay? And that, I'm not sure whether we really won that war or not, or just quietly everybody sides. The British had other interests, like they wanted to go back in the continent.
It's hard to figure out some of those historical.
And it's really, of course, then you had the SOBs like Jackson, who was General Jackson, who defeated the British in New Orleans. And I go and visit the battle site every time we go towards our reunion. And here's a guy who hated the British because they held him as a prisoner during the Revolutionary War and hit him in the side of his face with a flat blade of a sword because he wouldn't say something or other. He hated the British, and with the small men organized on ramparts, he defeated a British force. Oh, let me take that off there. And so, again, I'm trying to say, I got to put my feet in Putin. I'm a lover of the guy, especially after this crap of killing these people who supposedly were traitors. Well, then again, we executed Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, and there was no need to do that. The guy who did all the action, the real stuff, fled to Britain. Can't remember it. Fox was his name. And I want to say, what was resolved by that? The British would have enough sense of just turning these people, say, we need your. The British would do things like in World War II. They knew who came in and who was sending messages off to the Germans, and they give them a choice of being hung, or they turn them. You work for us, or we'll hang you after a trial, of course.
Well, you see,
that's my point. My point is,
well, but
look at where he's coming.
There's got to be a good. So there's no good guys in the nation-state form of government, according to Mr. Randall Pretzer. Nobody except Russia is semi-good. Except for all the people they slaughtered, the communists slaughtered. You know,
and that's a lot of propaganda too. Because
is it?
Because what are we talking about? When the Russians were moving towards Germany. You talking about that?
No, well, I don't know. I thought Lenin and Stalin slaughtered a lot of their own people.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
okay.
That's the party line from the West.
That's okay.
No, that's the party line.
Is that true?
Stalin was given. Well, he was given the job of general secretary. No one else wanted it. Who was the creator of the Red Army? God, I can't think of his name. Trotsky. There were several that said, "Well, give it to Stalin." Well, he became in charge of the whole bureaucratic machine. And Stalin wanted to bring, if you will, Russia into the 20th century.
Right.
Dealing with the kulaks, dealing with the peasants who wanted to hoard grain. You know, you had a problem. You had to deal with trade issues. You needed equipment, like tooling equipment. People say, tooling equipment. I said, you can't make pots and pans. You can't make rifles. You can't make wheels. You can't make engines without tooling equipment. And America and Germany had pioneered a lot of tooling equipment. Well, they were buying that. Of course, Soviet Union had a lot of gold too. Plus, remember, they had to deal with the white armies coming and invading them after World War I when they made their peace treaty with the Germans. They weren't going to waste any more men on something, and they knew the Germans ultimately were going to get whipped when the Allies brought in America. It's all over. It's all over. America comes in, 2 million men, huge amounts of. Here's the French. How do you Americans get across the wire? And they said, we don't have any trouble getting across. And then look down at their feet. The Americans have these big feet, and they just step on the wire. No nonsense.
Well,
all right. Now my point is that Stalin had a lot of things to deal with. Especially after Lenin, he kind of lost his mind in the end. I think he had a brain tumor or something or other. It was a mess trying to take care of the white armies.
So there was no extermination.
I'm saying
a lot of the Christian conservatives
died.
Or Catholic conservatives. There was a lot of.
Well, sure.
Slaughter.
Well, those fat cats.
A lot of Christians.
Well, you get a lot of this propaganda from people who were dealing with if you will, as a new culture, which wasn't necessarily, if you will, centered around capitalism. And then, of course, after the treaty, there was what was that real tariff? Right after, in the Depression, just before the Depression, our country set up this real high tariff, and all of a sudden, everything went to crap.
You're talking
32, or was it? No, it was 31. It was a tariff. God, I can't think of the name of the doggone tariff. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. So much is running in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying, you had two cultures that were clashing and dealing with terrible infrastructure problems and internal problems of feeding people. Well, look at the Depression. My God, we were within 2 weeks of national bankruptcy. Half the homes, the mortgages were in default. Mm-hmm. There were houses that were empty and people in the streets.
They didn't start slaughtering people.
No, they starved, that's all.
Did we lose?
No, they starved.
Did we have any start?
Let me give you an example. Here's Marshall, General Marshall. He's running the CCC, thank God, in the South. He said it was the greatest leadership challenge he'd ever had. And I may have said this before. And you'd see all these men coming in, and they just wanted to work. Half their pay had to go home. And he would notice their teeth were terrible. Well, they couldn't afford a doctor. They couldn't afford a dentist. And he was just shocked. Marshall, I don't care what anybody says. He was a good man. And he was the organizer of victory, too, in World War II, as far as I'm concerned. But that's another story. And this is what he has a big cocktail party at his home in Fort Benning, invites all the dentists. And he was very amiable, very persuasive, talked them all into taking care of the dental of the men that he had. And what happened is the Depression was so debilitating that almost 40% of the inductees were not fit for service when it started. Was it 1940?
That's interesting. That's interesting. I never heard that.
No, so plus a lot of them just plain died, starved. And those that came there were problems with the legs because rickets, teeth, lungs, eyes, ears.
That's
height.
kind of a censored part. I'm not disagreeing with you, but if true, I've never read that.
Oh,
it's very interesting.
Oh, it's terrible.
I could imagine.
Those are the stats. They were having some trouble.
I do know that, especially here in Texas, from my friends around my age and talking about their grandparents, poverty was pretty extreme here.
Oh, this is one of the poorest counties in the United States. I used to go down and I did DHR work for child support in the Valley for a year. In '79, we had Cameron County. I did Cameron County, Williston County, and Starr County. They were the three poorest counties in the state, and it was unbelievable. I'd have women standing in line. I would talk to them after I finished in court, putting people in jail for not paying child support. And they would say to me, if he would only pay his support, I wouldn't be here. I hate this. I hate taking any of this money. If it just paid the support, I could get by.
Well, we were talking about World War II, though, and we were talking
I'm not getting back to poverty. I mean, poverty that's devastating. People don't understand it. The British, right?
Well, and that's an article of war. I mean, one thing they do that's I've never heard intelligently discussed. I'm sure there's literature on it. Mm-hmm. If they want to oppress part of your country or something, you just starve them out.
Sure.
Pretty easy. You don't have to go shoot them, right?
That's right.
You know. So what about the Chinese in World War II? How was it? Were they purveyors of any great atrocities, or were they just too victimized by the Japanese? They couldn't really do much.
Well, it was that and Chiang Kai-shek, who they ultimately. My wife's reading the book Stillwell of the American Experience in China. She's read a number of Tuchman books. Barbara Tuchman's. Her Guns of August is very good. It's very appropriate, but there's several other books. But the problem is that Chiang Kai-shek, most he was interested in is paying off his buddies and taking the bribes, whereas Mao Zedong and the other people under him were truly interested. If they're going to have an army that did not go out and rape the population as it was moving through, like the Chinese army was doing on Chiang Kai-shek. And one of their big things was, when you leave, you put the door back up. And you say, well, what is he talking about? Well, many of the peasants would take their doors down at night and put it on a couple horses so they have a place to sleep. And it was like, you can't go in there and treat the population, especially the peasants, as targets of your weapon and as of your desires and think we're going to get anywhere. So if my sympathies went with anyone, who went with Mao, who fought the Japs. And of course the Japs had dehumanized the Chinese. That's how you actually, Homa, who was it? In Chiang Kai-shek, was it General Homa? Where they finally hung him. He just lost, it was it Yamashita? I can't remember. Yamashita was in Philippines, but they just lost control of their men. You can't let your army lose control of the field. You control they just killed about 220,000 people in Nanking. It was so bad that the German consulate had to intervene. Can you imagine? It was so bad that the German consulate had to intervene.
Well, you have a rather disturbing view of. I shouldn't laugh, God forbid.
No.
A rather disturbing view of history. None of these nation states hold up very well.
No.
Right?
Because it's human condition.
The history of the nation state is a human condition. Oh, interesting.
Human
the
condition.
atheist says the famous atheist says it's the human condition. It's the state of the soul.
That's why we have a constitution.
It's the evil in the human heart.
Why do you think we have a constitution? Constitution's there to limit the power of government.
I don't see that.
Well, that's what the founding fathers built it for. They understood the.
I don't know. I went over. Just went. Look,
please go ahead.
Okay, look. You look at the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
Constitution sets up the legislative branch, executive branch, the judicial branch,
Right.
and has a vague statement about writ of habeas corpus. Right.
Right.
That's all it has. Then they add these amendments,
Mm-hmm.
and then everybody says, "Oh, the Constitution this, the Constitution that." Those are mostly amendments. They could change those.
Well, of
There's
course.
not, so how are you saying it limited government? It set up government. I don't know. It set up the government.
The Constitution, it limits the power of the government. The government's going to be set up. I don't care. I'm not going to live under an anarchy. People say, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't want someone coming out to Flower Bluff and knocking on my door saying he's the warlord of Flower Bluff."
It set up the government. I don't know necessarily that effectively, did it? Was it that effective?
Yes.
You think the United States Supreme Court really follows the law and precedent and the Constitution?
I think they do the best they can.
I thought it's all politically based.
No.
Am I allowed to say that?
You'd be
Am I going to get disbarred for that?
No. That's okay. That's nothing wrong. My feelings are that when you get into that position of independence in the Supreme Court, as Justice Douglas said, many of these people have never had the chance or the opportunity to be independent as far as the direction of their thinking. He says, you get up here. When I was a judge for about 4.5 years, child support judge, and I also did family law and protective orders and other things. It was interesting because I had read that when you get up there, everything looks different. You're not an advocate anymore. And it was like that. I would sit there and listen to stuff and be very judicial. And I knew, I could tell where things were going, but I had to sit there anyway and listen. But a lot of times I can make my mind up in 10 minutes. And I thought that really bothered me. I said, maybe I'm not fit for this job.
Excuse me, we do have judges that'll just interrupt you and make, not so much now, but we had it in the past. They'll just interrupt you and make the decision. I've heard all I want to hear.
Oh yeah, and that's terrible.
You'll hear that.
The only time you want to interrupt, say, I think we've gone over that before. Can we go to something else? And I always said, I'm going to give everybody all the time you need to present your evidence. Just sit there and listen. And I went up and talked to a couple of judges who I trusted. I didn't trust very many of them. And I said, I'm worried. I talked to this Judge Yeager and Judge.
Judge Yeager was a good judge.
Judge Yeager.
He's still alive, right?
And Judge, who was it? No.
He retired about 10 years ago from San Patricio County.
And it's, Randy, don't worry about it. Just keep an open mind. That's all you can do, because that's just comes with.
Well,
the
here's
job.
what it is. Okay, I'm going to give you my opinion.
Yes, sir.
Why do lobbyists want to be around congressmen, even if they don't bribe them? Why will anybody in a room, basically with cops long enough, will basically confess? Basically, you're in that social and cultural environment, and that's what you become.
Well, let's look at it.
So that's how you think. I hate to speak this dramatically. I'm a street lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm attacked from all sides. I'm trying to represent people. I'm not establishment. I'm not hanging around with other establishment people. I don't get a paycheck from the state or federal government. Mm-hmm. I'm not a federal judge, and I'm hanging out and I see U.S. attorneys all day and I see U.S. marshals all day, and and we're all well paid and very stable. And then that's what you think. Well, I see him. I know him. Yeah, I agree with him.
Here's the problem.
That's how it is.
The federal positions, except for the Court of
But the state is the same, isn't it?
No. If you're appointed, the federal judge is appointed for life,
Right.
Subject to obviously bad conduct.
Be pretty extreme.
Yeah, you got to really do something bad. The Court of Military Appeals the term is 10 years and that's it, which is okay. Which I don't have any trouble with that. But that appointment for life gives you that independence to say to the marshals, "Don't be talking to that person that way." Say to the U.S. attorneys, "I don't want you saying that to me again."
It does.
And
They can.
They can. No, I've seen it. I've been there.
Well, certainly. But
That's fine with me.
But whenever
we're independent. People at the bar say, "Well, you take appointments and you just work for the state." I said, "No, I don't. I've taken the oath several times, and I'm going to do what I want to do, what I think is right. Now, if you don't want to go along with that, let's go to trial." That's all I say. This is the way you feel? Fine. We're going to go to trial. I get paid a lot more money. The heck with it.
Well, are you? Yeah, but this is an aside on changing subjects.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Aren't you amazed by the number of clients that they don't want to take the plea bargain and they don't want to go to trial, and they think there's something else that you can do, even if, let's say, you can't challenge it. Let's say a probable cause search. You can't challenge it. I said, well, look, what would you have me do? You don't want to take the plea. You don't want to go to trial. You don't want to do an open plea before. But they think there's, in your criminal law practice, you've seen that people think there's these other options. What would they be?
Well, they think it'll go away after a while, or the witnesses won't show up. And I said, I've heard that one before.
Well, we've heard that. When I was doing court appointments years ago, I'd hear that.
My question
Sometimes
is,
they don't, but
my
not
question,
often.
I got appointed to a different client the other day, and I said, well, what are your expectations? And all of a sudden, it's like, what? I said, well, what are you expecting to happen? And if they want to say dismissal, I said, don't think that's going to happen. And I'll explain to them why. Or and then they go on, and I try to answer their anxieties. And then I want to say, look, I have a duty to tell you what the state has offered. And you don't have to accept it.
And they get mad when you tell them sometimes.
Well, no, I just tell them, wait a minute now. I said, sir, wait a minute, the bar requires me, and the law requires me to tell you. If you don't want to accept it, it's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And I always say, there's incentive for me because I get paid more money for go to trial. If you want to look at it that way. I'm not going to sit here and just say you can't do this, you can't do that, or this is. I said there's probably incentive for me to say, oh, fine, let's go to trial, but I don't have to worry about going to prison or the county jail. You're the one who'll have to go if it doesn't work out like you expect it to. So that's my approach to let them know all the options.
Is it,
and I get this is something I'll go to the county jail and talk to them, and I'll be talking along, and I haven't got the discovery yet because you're supposed to.
The discovery is the evidence.
Yeah, it takes a while.
The client.
And I say, well, tell me what happened, and I'll say, he says, well, I'm not guilty, but what's the deal? And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. If you feel you're not guilty, we go to trial. And we kind of go back and forth on that. Then I say, let's get the discovery, the offense reports, and we'll discuss it again. But no one's going to give up, to go to trial. I said, sir, I've taken cases to trial. I thought, my God, what am I going to do in this? And there's an acquittal. All of a sudden, stuff comes up in the evidence that the police actually lie, which is hard for me to believe. And you're going, my God, the jury sees this, and the guy's out in the street. So you never know. I said, but sometimes it can be a crap shot. And I said, most of the cases are settled. I said, I'll tell you what the plea bargain is. You want to consider it, fine. If you want to go to trial, let's go. Let's get your list of witnesses. Let me interview them. Let's see where we are. But
well,
you're going to do this whether you're paid by the state or paid by your client. And they always say, well, look, my dad's got a lot of money and he'll pay you. And I said, no, the state pays me. If you want to hire another attorney, that's fine. Would you ask that person to please file a motion to substitute counsel?
And we all do that. And
of
course,
that's fine. That's fine.
I get all retained cases, and then people will be mad at me because I didn't tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So they'll hire another attorney, and it's a big waste of money. In all honesty, I could evaluate within, I'm thinking 80 to 90% degree of accuracy what the jury's going to do.
Well,
I would say 80%. I mean, but the client sometimes gets angry if you tell them.
Yeah.
Do you think the average juror is going to believe that this confession was false after you Mirandized it? In other words, you were given Miranda rights, you initial them all, and you confess. You think they're going to believe you? and you're a felon, a habitual felony offender, and you take the stand, and they'll get to ask you about that. Now you think that's believable? Okay, well, we'll do it.
Yep.
But they get mad a lot of times. People when confronted with the truth.
They think if they get mad enough, that things will go away. It's just desperation, and that's okay. And you got to understand that when you're dealing with the people. And I'm saying, sir, I wouldn't want to be sitting where you are either. I said, I wouldn't want to go to prison. I said, we're at kind of damage control now, but you go to trial, you never know what happens. I said, you don't have to testify at trial, and supposedly the jury is supposed to be warned numerous times not to draw any inference of guilt. Now, whether they're going to really do that or not is another story.
We had a high-profile crime that occurred recently wherein Judge Williams was acquitted of a crime.
Well, of one charge. There's one
acquitted of one and a mistrial on the other
Right.
one. And do you know if he took the stand? I didn't follow it that close.
I don't think he did. My
Mhm.
understanding. I think there was a video of him talking to was it the DPS or the police or wherever it was, and they just submitted that and so forth. And I don't believe he did.
Okay, I was just curious.
I could be wrong.
What is the
I didn't
percentage
watch it.
What is the percentage of criminal cases that you try wherein the defendant takes the witness stand?
Oh, very, very, very low.
Mhm.
That's the worst thing you can do.
Ordinarily,
And I've had it happen.
Mhm.
Oh, I've got to go and testify. I said, no, everything's fine. We're in the right. Oh, I got to get up there and have to admit. Well, they did have some scales, but that was catnip. It wasn't marijuana. Still found the guy not guilty because 3 of the policemen had told terrible stories. Especially when he was being arrested and in the back seat, that they were to come around. They were going to, hey guy, we're going to come around and visit your girlfriend. She's really good looking. See, everybody gives him that same look, yeah. And so I had him keep playing that disc, and I talked to the DAs about the case before.
They wouldn't listen to you?
I said, look at the disc. It's not worth trying. I said, the guy just finished a parole. I said, he'll take probation. It was one of these evading cases. And
Well,
and I mean, I went out of my way to talk to him. Oh no, our boss says, remember they had all these supervisors, that we're going to try it whether we win or lose. I said, if I'd have said that in the Army to my staff judge advocate when I was prosecuting, I would be a foot shorter after he finished going after me. You take a case if you're confident you can prove it, not whether you're going to win or lose it. But I said, all right, fine, we go in there, and it just goes downhill. They have 2 of them against me and two DAs. And we were up there in front of the judge once, and they were rattling on about something. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I said, Judge, that's too much for me. I'm just going to go ahead and sit down. I didn't want to roll. And the discs, it was a young black man in a Cadillac. And he was at that area of town where they all come blow their horns. Y'all need to go home. So he's leaving. One policeman said he's left at a high rate of speed. It was not a high rate of speed. You look at the disc. It was just, I said, officer, let's look at that again.
You are
And-
you are quite the radical today, Mr. Pretzer, talking about how awful the police are.
Well, I never
talking about the governments
felt
of the
that
world,
way.
and then
I never felt that way about the police because I always got along with them. Okay, I've had cases and I knew them, and I said, God. They said, gosh, Randy, we're sorry. We had to come in. We just couldn't put up with this guy anymore. I said, I understand. And so here's the first one. He said, oh, high rate of speed. I said, well, let's look at this. And I made him run it again, and God, and then they said, well, we shined a light at him, and he saw us, and he should have stopped. And there's a passenger, and there's no way they could have shined a.
Well,
next thing, they got him in the backseat where they tell him they're going to come around and they're going to meet with his girlfriend and everything. Don't worry about that. Kept saying that. I said, what a bunch of dummies. So I had that officer on the stand, and I said, sir, this is when we had a black police chief, a very good man, by the way.
that's the party line.
Well, that's my party line, and so that's why I say and I couldn't believe it. This guy.
I know that he was very well spoken.
Yeah, and I said, hey, how long you been in the police? Well, 11 years. And you were what? You were in short patrol before? Oh no, I was in the Navy police. I mean, you sure wasn't short patrol? And I said, all right, now when you said this thing, which is you agree with me, it's totally inappropriate, right? Well, yes. Did you report it to your supervisor? How are you going to answer the question? Yes, I did, or no, I didn't. No way. So I go on to the next one. I said, well, did you go and report it to the police chief. And then they get up and objecting. And the judge sustains the objection, and I got it in anyway. The jury's, Jesus, judge. And so the guy who was sitting next to him, working on the computers they were driving on, he said he heard nothing like that. And I mean, these are all falsehoods. And so my final argument, my final phrase to the jury is, ladies and gentlemen, all we have is a black man in a Cadillac, and you know what I mean. Sat down, they were back in 5 minutes.
Was that your closing?
That was that. Well, I had a closing, but I ended it.
I was going to say.
I kept it short.
I've never had enough nerve to do just a 3-line closing.
No. I ended. I kept it short, and I was looking at them. I said, either they're mad at me or they're mad at them.
So then you're of the opinion that many of the people in the United States I guess the current phrase is African American, Black Americans are often targeted and a victim of oppression.
I'm sure they are, and this is what happened here. And they had no business being out there anyway. Why aren't they on the beat going around the neighborhoods taking care of people who are breaking into houses? They go up there and get a bullhorn and want all these people to disperse. And I said, so what? And it was... And also, by the way, that same day, Mark Gonzalez, who had an aggravated robbery, got an acquittal. So poor Mark, the prosecutor, bless his heart, well, I always liked Mark, had these 2 acquittals, and it was like all over the courthouse. And I said, I don't like this kind of publicity. I'm not that kind of attorney. I believe in justice.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Mark Gonzalez was defending people, and he got 2 acquittals.
He got an acquittal, and I got an acquittal the same day.
I see.
Just a coincidence, But it was like, I wanted to say to some people.
Does word get around the courthouse like that? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. He was a couple of people.
I'm not a popular guy.
I
just walk out.
And I said, I said, let me tell you what happened. And I said, I don't like this. I'm going to fight every case and do this and that. You can really damage some people, especially if they get a terrible sentence. And
certainly, you have to evaluate the case on the evidence.
And my client made a nice appearance, and he actually went on and testified that was only catnip in the car, which it was. They didn't find any drugs. Of course, he was probably maybe Mexican with some stuff. I don't know. I told him, don't testify. Oh, I have to. But he made a nice appearance.
Well, I have I can't say everything, but
and
I would say generally when I
yes. I don't mean to demean the district attorneys either. They were doing their job, and I never.
Well, years ago, right.
I don't mean I get along with them very fine. In fact, they're my friends now. I talk to them all the time.
I have a similar war story. This was years ago.
Go ahead.
Similar war story. Years ago, I went to a woman, assistant district attorney. I said, "Look, you got a bad case." Mm-hmm. She got mad. She says, "I don't need a defense attorney telling me I got a bad case." Well, if you know me, I don't have time for mind games, right? I don't do that, right? I'm just going to say it. So we went to trial, and I won the case, right? And then she badmouthed me all over the courthouse. He lied to me about the evidence. I said, "Look, so we got a big fight. I got other things to do. So I'm pretty straightforward, and I'll say too, if if it's marginal, I'll say that usually too. Mm-hmm. I'll say, I got a story here to tell. Mm-hmm. And that's when you don't know which way it's going to go when you go to court. Sometimes you don't know which way it's going to go.
Well.
And what about all these tapes? What was interesting is what you were saying. Apparently, in the last 5 years or 10 years, now we got to watch all these videos.
Oh yeah,
at dash cams,
which is pretty good. It helps me because if I see my client on there, they want to tell me how wonderful they are, and I say, you don't look wonderful on the disc. But that's just me. And I said, I'll be the one to evaluate the case. Now, if you don't like my evaluation, that's fine. We'll just go to trial. It's just one of those.
Well, let's return back.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
No.
And again, I try to get along with the district attorneys, and I can't think of anyone that I have not gotten along well with. There may be one or two who are just difficult, but then you know how to handle that. That is, do discovery. Go through the drill, make sure you got all your stuff together, do your trial notebook. If you're going to trial, don't go in there without a trial notebook. Can't believe attorneys I've seen go in. I said, you must be brilliant.
Well, I'm
sorry. Go ahead, you're going to tell me something.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Let's move on.
We were talking about...
I'm sorry.
We're talking about, we got off on this tangent regarding criminal trials, and I was just saying about all the videos that you have to look at now, and I think it's kind of burdensome to look at all these videos compared to the way it used to be. But obviously, do you think that it winds up in more acquittals, more justice, all the videos that we now see?
I think so.
All the tapes?
It's better to see.
You think it's a fairer system now?
You get to see the demeanor of the witnesses better, and many times,
Okay.
at times, it can work in your favor, and it'll help you if it's not working in your favor to talk to your client and say, "I viewed this. I want you to look at this. Oh no, I trust you. Okay, go ahead." It gives you a lever to bring some resolution that's acceptable to all parties.
Aren't you impressed with the with our legislative body in Texas for a conservative Republican body passing the Morton Act, wherein now you basically have to get all, you know, you're entitled to all this evidence.
Yeah.
It's required, and it'll probably reduce the number of false convictions markedly.
I think it will. I think it'll bring it about, and it gives more tools to the defense and the state to make sure they get everything together and look at the case.
So you think sometimes, what you were inferring earlier, you think that there have been occasions wherein the state or the prosecutor, the assistant district attorney, goes forward on a case without knowing how weak their case is sometimes.
Well, and I know that I remember a couple cases in Rockport with the county attorney, assistant county attorney, and we thought we were going to have to go on a suppression motion, and that person said, "Well, let's sit down and look at these discs, though." So we looked at discs, and both of the cases for the state were terrible. One fell right in within the Rodriguez. In other words, when you stop somebody in a traffic stop, unless you could find something else to hold them, you don't keep them there and call the dogs. Now, number two, just because someone comes out of somebody's dope house, that doesn't mean you can stop their car. That's not probable cause. Bingo, shut them all down. And I remember this person was basically fired because he dismissed those cases. I said, fine, I'll go to court. And every time I went to court on each one of them, they dismissed them. Again, I said, Judge, I'm going to have to file a motion to suppress, and we'll need a couple more weeks. Oh, no, we're going to dismiss. No, the video made the difference.
So the video has acted with more equity. Yeah.
That's my experience.
Right.
And I'm saying, and if you're a prosecutor, and I'm sure they do, I'm not saying they don't, look at your stuff, which I know they do, and stand back at it for a while, and if it's a problem, have somebody else look at it if you're having trouble with it. Sometimes you need to have a second opinion.
Right. Well, that's definitely true. And not somebody who your clients are in jail and they're getting second opinions from their
and
jailhouse.
Well, and furthermore,
jailhouse cons
I
or
think,
jailhouse people.
if you have a district attorney that also allows the assistant district attorneys to make decisions, if you will, on their own. And I used to say to my gut, when I had people under me, attorneys, I said, if you got a problem with the case, come talk to me about it. If for some reason you don't want to do it, either we're going to get rid of it or I'll do it myself. I don't want to put you in that position. If you have something.
When did you have attorneys under you?
Oh, when I was with the AG's office and when I was in the Army.
Okay. Well, now you would never know by looking at Mr. Pretzer that he was really such a radical man. Mm-hmm. No, just joking.
Well,
just joking.
I like to dress
and,
nice.
And we got off on a tangent.
Oh, go ahead. Where are we going now?
No, we got off on a tangent. We were going to discuss.
We're running out of time.
But we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you always,
Mark,
Mr. Pretzer, for
enjoy
coming
it
on.
very much.
Attorney, thank you very much. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
I've flown around the world in a plane. I've settled revolutions in Spain. And the North Pole I have charted. Still I can get started with you. On the golf course, I'm under par. Metro Goldwyn have asked me to star. I've got a house, a show place. Still I can't get no place with you. 'Cause you're so supreme. Lyrics I write of you. I dream day and night of you. And I scheme just for the sight of you. Baby, what good does it do? I've been consulted by Franklin D. Greta Garbo has had me to tears. Still I'm broken hearted, 'cause I can't get started with you.